Bonjour, Jayak. I'm Kaya DeerInWater, the Community Garden Manager here at Citizen Potawatomi Nation. And today we're going to be going over some basic sage teachings and sage harvesting techniques and protocols. This right here is white sage, or Widoktadwen, and it is one of our 4 foundational medicines that we in contemporary Potawatomi culture use for prayer and ceremony. But there are probably a dozen or more smudging plants used medicinally for their smoke and properties of the smoke. So even though this is the most widely used, it isn't the only one. So I hope you enjoy our video. So here we have Widoktadwen, white sage, prairie white sage, or Artemisia ludoviciana, as it's called in botanical Latin. And this is one of our 4 most sacred foundational medicines. It is a plant that is found all over eastern North America, from the Rockies to the Atlantic coast, up into Ontario, Canada, down into the Gulf states. And for our contemporary Potawatomi usage of white sage, it is associated with the direction of west, and it is known for its cleansing properties. It helps us. The medicine of Widoktadwen was gifted to us by the spirits to help cleanse our minds and our bodies. And so here we're in the garden in one of our rows of sage, but it is found also out in the prairies in Oklahoma. In our homelands in the Great Lakes, it's traditionally harvested in the full moon of August, or Minka Gizis, the berry harvesting moon, and it's harvested around the same time when wild rice is ready. So one of the things that you want to know about when you're going out to harvest is always ask permission. Offer your sema, your tobacco, and ask permission from the plants and from the spirits of the place that you're at. And then you don't want to harvest from a roadside or a ditch or a agricultural field. You want to kind of go out into the prairies and margins of forests to get the clean sage. The other stuff might have pollution. You especially want to stay away from places like under power lines, because the power companies come by and spray it with pesticides. So that stuff's not good for medicine. And we use it to smudge, so it's a sacred medicine for us. It's kind of similar to frankincense and myrrh that Christians use in their ceremonies. And so for us, it's a cleansing herb that we use in our ceremonies. But it's, you also want to harvest the leaves and stems that are not flowering or seeding. And let's see, none of these are flowering quite yet, but I thought I saw one earlier when I was looking at this. So just gather your, hello bug friend, gather your clippers, or you can break it off if that's what you're told. And then you never want to pull it out of the ground. You always want to clip it off so that it has more resources to the plant, has more resources to grow back. And then this is a good long portion of sage. When you're bundling, you typically only want, two hand widths, about 10 inches or so, maybe a foot. And yeah, but the rest of the branch can be used for other purposes, for teas, for other medicines. And you can also use it as a smudge, loose leaf, not instead of bundled. So nothing is actually wasted, even though only the top portion is bundled. And then you just go around and clip off the top portion of all your plants. And it's typically found in large patches or colonies. So once you find a patch or a colony, you can go and get quite a bit of it. And healthy sage is very, it grows very profusely in the right area. So it's not one of those plants that you really have to worry about over harvesting, although you should be respectful of how much you take, leaving some for other people, and only take what you need, what you're going to use or gift to other people. So, like I was saying, we use the top portion to bundle, and then so that's the top 2 hands, right about here. You gather, 13 of those, and then that makes a bundle. But then this portion, you have just as much of the plant left for loose leaf sage, which can either be burned in ceremony or you can use it for medicine. It's a great antiseptic, or not antiseptic, sorry, antibacterial, antimicrobial, antifungal. It's a great anti-inflammatory, antispasmodic. There's so much medicine in this. The active compound is artemisian, which is a turpentine chemical that helps with expelling all those things that I just talked about for those ailments. And yeah, I've used it a lot last year. I would put a pot of water boiling on the stove and then add in a few branches of sage, and it kind of fills your whole house with the smell of sage. It's kind of like a essential oil diffuser, but old school on the stove. And it's it works really well for flu and cold season because it has the opposite energies. So where a lot of flus are cooling and drying, this is a warming and moistening medicine. Okay, so we're out here on the Sharp property where the community garden is, kind of behind the powwow grounds. And we're out here looking for the southern white sage, or Artemisia ludoviciana subspecies mexicana. Some people lump it all together, and other people split it out into different species. But this is the one that grows down here in Oklahoma, and you'll know it because it's got a more greenish tint to it. It's divided more. The leaves are more segmented. They look more jagged, but then the underside is always just as white. So that is something that's an easy signifier. So you can kind of bend the grass back, and you notice that the ragweed doesn't have the white underside, whereas the sage, the Widoktadwen, does have the white underside. And this is a pretty typical habitat for it, kind of on the margins of a forest, or kind of in between fields. You could even find it in old agricultural landscapes. And again, We want to offer our sema and ask permission before harvesting, and then only take as much as you need. And we are, let's see, this is about summer solstice, so middle of June here in Kiti territory, in the homelands of the Wichita. Versus in our homelands in the Great Lakes, it would be mid-August that you'd be harvesting. So probably about 8 weeks earlier down here. Okay, I also wanted to say before we leave that if you don't know your plants or your territory where you're gathering from, it's probably best to go out with someone who does know it or a native person from that territory, because there aren't many things that you could confuse sage with, but you never know, and it's best to be safe. It's also probably best to ask someone from your territory, the native people of where you're from, if there's any specific protocols that they would like you to follow, because you are on their territory, and it's best to be respectful. So you want to, of course, make sure all the strands of sage that you're going to bundle are free of grass and weeds and bugs, all that kind of stuff. And then I measure it about 2 hand lengths. So 1, 2, that's a little short, but it's good enough for government work. So, yep, and then after you measure it, you, of course, cut it, and then I was told you use 13 strands of sage, 1 for each moon in the year, but I'm sure there are other teachings out there. Next, once you have all your strands together, you want to measure out a good long piece of string. Longer is better than shorter, because if you get halfway through the process and you're too short, then you're going to have to go back and cut another piece of string and start over. So now we have our nice long piece of string, and unfortunately this is not the right string because this is plastic, and we can't burn plastic when we're burning sage, so this is merely for educational purposes. The stuff you want to use is the twine that's made out of cotton or some thread, or it's usually brown or green. You can find it at the hardware store or a garden center. And that burns clean when you're smudging with your sage instead of burning plastic. Next, you get your partner, assistant, to hold the top of the bundle. You can do it by yourself, but it's a lot harder. And you start at the bottom, kind of the lowest portion. You can get a good number of the leaves together, and then you want to go tight but not too tight, because it's going to shrink, but you don't want it to mold from being packed in too tight. And then you just go around and around. You try to line up where you're crissing and crossing so that it looks nice and presentable. And I usually go about 1 inch or 2 up every cross, every part of the braid or bundle. Sometimes they turn out prettier than others. Everyone's unique. And then at the top, you just go around again And any old knot that you know, square knot. Again, tight, but not too tight, because it's going to shrink when it dries. And then, yeah, so that's kind of the finished product. And then another important step after this is to let it hang kind of vertically, so that when it dries, it's all drying this way. If you hang it, if you set it on a shelf or something like that, you have to, you know, make sure to rotate it probably twice a day or something like that, so that you don't get a flat spot. And also, if it's, you know, humid or whatever where you are, then the bottom side can turn brown where it's touching the surface, because it's not getting airflow. Another important thing to say is that depending on the humidity where you are, it could take 3 to 4 days or a week to dry. You'll know when it's kind of crunchy. This is still kind of floppy because it has a lot of moisture in it. Yeah, so the drying process depends on the weather and climate of where you are. But yeah, that's the basic process.